They handed Miss Eleanor Vance a child's slate at the lessons table and told her, before young Julian, to practice her letters, because a woman who keeps no ledger cannot count. She set it down. Blank, at the harvest supper, 30 tenants watching, the steward Silas Crane raised his glass. "We must be gentle with poor Miss Vance. She has the manners of a lady and the arithmetic of a child." The room laughed. She counted the laughs. She counted everything. What Crane never asked was why a simple woman watched the account books so closely every quarter day, nor what a mind does with 3 years of numbers it is never allowed to write down. If you've ever been thought stupid by the very people you were quietly outthinking, this story is for you. Subscribe now and comment what city you're watching from. The year Sir Reginald Ashworth died, a governess came to Thornrise Hall. Her name was Eleanor Vance. She was 34, plain in the way that plain women are allowed to be forgotten, and she arrived on a grey Yorkshire morning with one trunk and a face that gave away nothing at all. The hall stood 2 miles from the market town of Wexbridge, low and long and old, with mullioned windows that caught the light in little diamonds and gardens gone soft at the edges. A house waiting. That was how it felt to her. A house holding its breath for a boy to grow up in it. The boy was Master Julian Ashworth. 11 years old, the heir to everything, and, just then, the owner of almost nothing he could touch. His father lay in the churchyard, his mother had gone before that, and the running of the estate, the rents, the ledgers, the whole slow machine of it had passed into the hands of the steward. Mr. Silas Crane. Eleanor met him on her first day. He came out to the hall with his hands folded and his smile arranged, a broad man with a broad manner, the sort who filled a doorway on purpose. He looked at her the way a farmer looks at a plough he did not order. He decided something about her in that first half-minute. She could see him do it. "Miss Vance," he said, "you'll school the boy his letters and his manners. Nothing more taxing than that, I should think." She curtsied. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Crane." She did not tell him that she had kept the books. There was no reason he should have known it. No one at Thornrise thought to ask. But before Thornrise, before any of this, Eleanor Vance had sat behind the counter of a small drapery in Wexbridge, her father's shop, ribbon and calico and thread, and she had kept its accounts from the age of 15. Every yard sold, every debt owed, every farthing in and out. Her father used to say she had a head like a strong-box, and he was not being kind when he said it, only accurate. She would read a column of figures once, and it would stay, not for a day, not for a week. It would stay the way a name stays, or a face. She could not have lost it if she tried. The drapery was gone now. Her father was gone. And Eleanor had learned a thing about the world in the years between, which was this: a woman who is thought clever is watched, and a woman who is thought simple is left alone. Being left alone had its uses, near the boy. That was where she wanted to be. So she let them think her plain and slow, and it cost her nothing, and it kept her close. She let them think it. That was the whole of her mistake, though it did not feel like one yet. The first weeks were quiet. She taught Julian his sums at a little table by the schoolroom window. She found him quick and sad and honest, a boy who missed his father in a way he did not have the words for, and who wanted, more than anything, that his father's name should stay clean. He asked her once whether his father had been a good man. She said yes, she believed it. Sir Reginald had trusted Crane, and trust, she was coming to think, is not always the same thing as wisdom. She watched the steward. She could not help it. It was in her nature to count, and there was a great deal at Thornrise to be counted. He came into the schoolroom one grey afternoon in the 3rd month. Julian was working a problem in long division, his tongue between his teeth, the chalk squeaking. Eleanor stood at his shoulder, and Crane came in without knocking, as he came into every room, and he stood looking at the two of them for a moment, with that arranged smile. Then he crossed to a cupboard by the wall and took out an old child's slate. A small one, cracked at one corner, the kind an infant uses to learn its first letters. He set it down on the table in front of Eleanor, not in front of Julian, in front of her. "I've been thinking, Miss Vance," he said, and his voice was gentle, the way a man's voice is gentle when he means to wound. "It won't do for the boy to learn his figures from someone who can't keep her own. Why don't you practice your letters, alongside him? There's no shame in it. A woman who keeps no ledger can hardly be expected to count." The room went very still. Julian looked up. He looked at the slate, and then at Eleanor, and his young face began to colour with a shame that was not his to feel. He opened his mouth. She touched his arm, lightly, under the table, where Crane could not see. Not yet. That was what the touch said. Not now. Eleanor looked at the slate. She looked at Silas Crane. And she reached out, and she took the little slate, and she set it down flat and blank at the corner of the table. She did not write on it. She did not defend herself. She did not say that she had kept a shop's whole reckoning in her head before he had learned to shave. She simply set it down, empty, and folded her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Crane," she said. He waited a moment for more. There was no more. Something crossed his face, not quite disappointment, but close to it, the look of a man who has thrown a stone into a well and heard no splash. Then he nodded, satisfied enough, and left the room. The door closed. Julian turned to her, furious in the way of loyal children. "You should have told him," he whispered. "You should have told him what you can do. And what can I do?" she asked mildly. "You know the whole book of the schoolroom. You know every sum I've ever got wrong. You never forget a single hush," she said. But she smiled at him. A small smile, only for him. "Some things are better kept than spent, Julian." She left the blank slate where it was, at the corner of the table. It sat there for days. A little grey square of nothing. She did not know yet that she would keep it far longer than that. The private wound closed over, as private wounds do. But something had shifted in her. She began to watch the account books. It was not difficult. Crane was careless in the way that confident men are careless. He believed himself unwatched, and so he did not guard what he thought no one could read. The quarterly reckoning was done in the library, at the long table under the tall windows. And one afternoon, sent to fetch a book of maps for Julian's geography, Eleanor found the ledger lying open on that table. Left there, face up, in the honest light. She did not stop walking. She did not lean over it. Her eyes passed across the open page once, the way your eyes pass over a signpost on a road you're already travelling, no more attention than that. One pass. And it was enough. Tenant of Low Meadow. A figure entered against the name. £8. She fetched the book of maps. She went back up to the school that evening, walking the long gallery with Julian before his supper. She said, quite lightly, almost to herself, "The tenant of Low Meadow paid £12 this quarter." Julian frowned. "How do you know? You can't know that." "Can't I?" "You're guessing." He grinned, delighted, thinking it a game. "You're only guessing, Miss Vance." £12? You can't possibly. "Perhaps I am guessing," she said. But she was not. She had heard the farmer of Low Meadow say it himself, 3 weeks earlier, at the church gate, £12 this Michaelmas. Near broke my back for it, but £12 I paid, and £12 writ down. And the ledger on the library table said 8. She kept no second book. She never made a note. She never needed to. She had read the page once, and it had stayed, the way everything stayed, entire and exact and waiting. 12 paid. 8 written. £4 on one farm in 1 quarter, gone into the dark between the true number and the number on the page. She did not know yet how many farms there were, but she was beginning to count. The second wound came on quarter day, when the wages were paid. Eleanor stood in the steward's office to receive hers, and Mrs. Follet, the housekeeper, stood by the door with a basket of linen on her arm, waiting her turn. Crane counted out the coins onto the desk. Eleanor watched them fall. She was always watching numbers fall, and the little stack, when he had done, was short. Not by much. By half. Half her quarter's wage, missing from the pile. She looked at it. She looked at him. An error of the ledger, I'm afraid, Crane said smoothly before she had said a word. These things happen when the accounts run long. I'll see it put right next quarter, Miss Vance, you have my word. He smiled. You do understand these matters can be tangled. Difficult for anyone to follow. Mrs. Foley by the door watched, that was the point of it, that Mrs. Foley should watch, that the housekeeper should see the simple governess take her short wage and nod and be grateful. Crane was building something, coin by coin and look by look, a story that Eleanor Vance could not count, could not complain, could not be believed. He was making a witness of Mrs. Foley against a day that had not come yet. Eleanor knew all of this. She saw the shape of it as clearly as she saw the coins. She gathered the short wage into her hand. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Crane," and she filed it. The half-quarter withheld, the date, the word error, Mrs. Follett by the door. All of it laid down in her memory in its proper place, exact to the shilling. Not forgiven, filed, because that was the difference between them, though he would not learn it for a long while yet. Silas Crane wrote the smaller number on the page and trusted the paper to keep his secret. Eleanor Vance wrote nothing at all and kept everything. The third wound was public. It was meant to be. The harvest supper came at the end of October, when the fields were in, and the tenants gathered at the hall as they had every year in Sir Reginald's time, a long table set up in the great hall, boards groaning with beef and bread and ale, 30 tenants and their wives filling the benches, the fire roaring, the old rafters warm for one night with the noise of it. Eleanor sat near the foot of the table with Julian beside her, because someone must mind the boy, and because it suited Crane to have her low. She had never much cared for these gatherings. Too many voices. But she listened. She always listened. And the men at that table talked of their rents as men will, half boasting, half groaning, what they'd paid, what they'd made, how the year had used them. And Eleanor sat quietly at the foot of the table and gathered every figure they let fall, and set each one against the pages she had seen, and the dark space between the two grew wider in her mind with every cup that was poured. Then Crane stood. He had drunk enough to be warm and not enough to be foolish, and he rose at the head of the table with his glass raised, and the room quieted for him. Because he was the steward, and the steward's word ran at Thornrise now. A toast, he said, to the year and to the harvest, and to this house that has fed us all. A rumble of approval. Cups lifted. And then his eye came down the length of the table, and found Eleanor at the foot of it, and his smile widened, and Eleanor knew what was coming a half-second before it came, the way you know the shape of a stone before it strikes. And, said Crane, a gentle word for our good Miss Vance, who minds the young master so faithfully. He paused for the timing of it. We must be gentle with poor Miss Vance. She has the manners of a lady and the arithmetic of a child. The room laughed. It came all at once, 30 throats, warm and easy and cruel, without meaning much by it. The laughter of people who did not know they were being handed a lie to hold. It rolled down the table toward her, and Eleanor sat at the foot of it, with her hands folded still on the wood before her, and she did not flush, and she did not drop her eyes, and she did not smile the small, forgiving smile they would have wanted. She simply sat and let it break over her, and counted it. She counted the laughs, 22, perhaps 23, some throats louder than others. She counted the ones who did not laugh. Old Harrow of Low Meadow, who had paid his £12 and looked now into his cup. 2 of the wives, who caught something in her stillness that their husbands missed. Julian, beside her, whose small hand had closed hard into a fist on the bench. She counted the raised glass in Crane's hand, held up to the firelight, the ale in it gone amber. She counted everything. That was what they never understood about her, not one of them, all the length of that long, warm table. They thought her empty because she was quiet. They mistook a strong-box for an empty room. Under the table, Julian's fist trembled with the wrong he could not answer. Eleanor laid her hand over it, lightly, and held it still. "Eat your supper," she murmured, so only he could hear. "It's a good year for the beef." "They shouldn't," he whispered, fierce and low. "They shouldn't laugh at you. You know more than the whole of them." "They may laugh," she said. "It costs them nothing tonight." "Tonight," she said, "tonight." And Julian was too young and too angry to hear the weight she put on the word. But she heard it. Tonight it cost them nothing. She had already begun to reckon what it would cost, and when, and to whom, though the letter that would set it moving was still 6 months from being written, and the great hall that laughed at her now was the same hall in which, one day, before a magistrate and every one of these same men, she meant to stand and speak. The supper wore on, the fire burned down. The tenants went out into the cold in ones and twos, calling their good nights, and Crane stood at the door and shook their hands like a lord, and Eleanor took Julian up to bed. At the schoolroom door the boy stopped. "Miss Vance," he said. He would not look at her. "Is it true?" What he said. About the arithmetic. She knelt down to his height, there in the dark passage with the one candle. She looked at him a long moment. "Master Julian," she said, "ask me any sum you like, any sum in the world, and I'll give you the answer before you've finished asking it, but you must promise me something first. Anything that you'll say nothing of it. To Mr. Crane, to Mrs. Foley, to anyone at all. Not yet." She held his eyes. "There will be a day for it. I promise you there will be a day. But it is not tonight, and it is not for a good while yet, and until that day comes, you must let them think of me exactly what they think tonight. Will you do that?" He searched her face. He was 11, but he was his father's son, and there was a steadiness in him underneath the child. "Why?" he said. "Why let them?" "Because a thing you are watching," she said, "does not misbehave, and a thing that thinks itself unwatched does whatever it pleases." She smoothed his collar. "Mr. Crane thinks I cannot count, Julian. That is the most useful thing in the whole world for me, just now, that he should go on thinking it. Do you understand?" Slowly, he nodded. He did not fully understand, how could he, but he trusted her, which was better. "I am glad," he said suddenly, "that you are my governess, even if they laugh." Something moved in her that she did not let show. "Go to bed," she said gently. "We have geography in the morning." But she did not go to bed herself, not for a long while. She sat by the schoolroom window in the cold, with the candle out and the moon on the fields, and she did the thing she had begun to do every night since the day she saw 8 written where 12 had been paid. She walked the estate in her mind, farm by farm. She had them all now, every tenant's name, every field, every figure the men had let fall at the church gate and the market and the harvest table, and against each true sum she set the sum she had glimpsed in the ledger those few times Crane left it open, and where she had not seen the page she reckoned the pattern of it. Because a thief who steals £4 from Low Meadow steals from Harrow's neighbour too, and the shape of a lie, once you have its shape, tells you where the rest of it hides. She walked them one by one. Low Meadow, 12 paid, 8 written, 4 gone. The Fold, 9 paid, 6 written. Barrowgate, the 2 Wexbridge cottages, Keppel's holding on the north side. Quarter by quarter, 3 years back to the season Sir Reginald died and Crane took the reins, because it had started then, she was nearly sure of it, in the confusion of a great house left to a child, when no one was minding the man who minded everything. She added it as she walked. She could not have helped adding it if she wished to. and the sum, when she reached the end of it and turned back and walked it a second time to be certain, came to something near £600. Near £600 drawn quietly out of the estate over 3 years, out of the rents of men who had broken their backs to pay them, out of the inheritance of an orphaned boy who wanted only that his dead father's name stay honest, siphoned into Silas Crane's own purse, coin by coin and quarter by quarter, before Julian should come of age and learn to read a ledger for himself. It was not petty. She understood that clearly now, sitting in the cold. She had thought at first it might be small dishonesty, the kind stewards fall into. It was not. It was systematic. It was patient. It was the slow, deliberate looting of a dead man's trust by the very man that trust had rested on. And the worst of it, the thing that kept her at the window long after the candle had gone out, was this. The paper was all his. Every page of it. The ledgers were in Crane's keeping and Pettigrew's clean hand, and they were in their way immaculate, because the crime did not live on the page. The crime lived in the difference between the number on the page and the number that had crossed a farmer's palm, and that difference was written down nowhere in the world. Nowhere on paper. There was no saved receipt, no second book, no hidden ledger of the truth she might one day carry to a magistrate and lay upon the table as proof. Crane had been too careful for that. He had left her nothing to point to. Nothing but what was in her head. She sat with that a long time. The one ledger of the truth in all the world was the one behind her own eyes, and it could not be seized, and it could not be burned, and it could not be bought, but it could not be shown, either, it could only be spoken. And who would believe a simple woman speaking against a steward's clean and lettered book? The moon moved off the fields, the house creaked and settled, and Eleanor Vance sat in the dark with £600 of another man's dishonesty held whole and exact behind her still face, and began, very slowly, to think not of the wound of it any longer, but of the answer to it. Not accusation. Accusation could be laughed at, as she had been laughed at tonight. Not confrontation. Crane would simply produce his lovely clean pages and shake his head at the poor governess who had got above herself. No, it would have to be something else. Something lawful, something with a witness that outranked him. And it would have to catch him in a place where his clean book could not save him, where the very cleanness of it became the thing that hanged him. She did not have the whole shape of it yet, that night at the window. But she had the first thread. And she had, she reminded herself, all the time she needed. Time was the one thing a patient thief and a patient woman both possessed in plenty. In the days that followed, she gave nothing away. She taught Julian his geography and his sums. She curtsied to Crane in the passages. She thanked Mrs. Follet for the schoolroom fire. She was, to every eye at Thornrise Hall, exactly the plain, slow governess of the harvest toast. A woman with the manners of a lady and the arithmetic of a child. And every night, at the cold window, she walked the estate again and let the numbers settle deeper until she could have spoken them backward. Until the whole 3 years of Silas Crane's dishonesty stood in her mind as clear and ordered as a fair-copied book, every farm, every quarter, every true sum, and every false one. The date beside each, and the difference to the very penny. She was building it, line by line, in the only place he had never thought to guard. There came an evening, near the turn of the year, when Julian looked up from his lessons and studied her a while, the way children do when a large thought has caught them. "Miss Vance," he said, that day, with the slate, when he told you to practice your letters. He hesitated. You were angry, weren't you? Underneath, even though your face didn't do anything. She set down her pen. She looked at him a moment, this boy who saw more than his years, and she decided he was old enough for one true thing. "I was not angry, Julian," she said. "I was patient. They are not the same, though they can look alike from outside." She glanced toward the corner of the table where the little cracked slate still lay, blank, where she had set it down all those weeks ago and never moved. He gave me that slate to shame me, to make me small in front of you, and to make himself sure I was too simple to be feared. A faint thing touched the corner of her mouth. But you see, he told me a true thing without knowing it. He said a woman who keeps no ledger cannot count. She looked back at the boy. He was almost right. I keep no ledger. Julian's brow creased. Then how? I keep no ledger, she said again, softly, because I have never needed one. And she picked up the blank slate from the corner of the table, and she turned it over in her hands once, and she set it down again, empty, grey, saying nothing, holding nothing that anyone could read. She looked at it as though it were the most useful object in the house. Somewhere below them, in the library under the tall windows, Silas Crane was closing his fine, clean books for the night, sure as sunrise that the only person at Thornrise Hall who could ever undo him could not so much as add two figures together. He had never once asked her what she remembered. He never would, until it was far too late to matter. The letter went out on quarter day. Eleanor carried it to the post herself, down the long road toward Wexbridge, 2 miles of frost-hardened mud. She did not trust it to another hand. The seal was plain, the direction was plain. Magistrate Bartholomew Oakes, at the county seat. Inside, no accusation, only a request. That the steward's accounts of Thornrise Hall be examined at a formal hearing, and that she, the governess, be permitted to speak to them. She posted it. She walked home. She said nothing to anyone. That was the whole of her action. A woman with no paper does not lay a trap of paper. She lays a trap of patience. The waiting was the hard part, not the fear, the waiting. 10 days after, the returning post came up the drive, and Silas Crane met it at the door as he always did, hungry for anything the county might send. Eleanor watched from the schoolroom window. She saw him lift a letter, and she saw him go still, the way a man goes still when he has read a seal he did not expect. He came up the stairs himself. That was rare. He filled the schoolroom door. Miss Vance. His voice was smooth as ever, but there was a new thing under it, a testing thing. A curious matter. A letter from the magistrate's office at the county seat, addressed here. I did not know we had business with Mr. Oakes. Julian's head came up. Eleanor did not look at the boy. She kept her eyes soft, a little vague, the eyes he liked her to have. Oh, she said. Yes, I hope I did no wrong, Mr. Crane. I wrote to inquire after a former situation. In Wexbridge, a family I once served thought to write me a character, and I did not know the direction, so I asked the magistrate's clerk if he might know it. She looked down at her hands. It was a foolishness. I am sorry to have troubled the post. The room was very quiet. Crane looked at her a long moment. She let him look. She let him see nothing but a slow woman fretting over a servant's letter. A character, he said at last. For my next situation, she said, when the young master no longer wants me. Something in him loosened. She watched it loosen. A man believes most easily the thing that flatters him, and it flattered Silas Crane to believe that Eleanor Vance thought no further than her next place. He almost smiled. You should have asked me, he said. I keep the directions of the county. I would have spared you the trouble. I did not like to trouble you, she said. No. He turned the letter over in his hand, and she saw him decide it was nothing, and she saw him tuck it away to open at his leisure, which meant he had not yet read Oakes's answer, which meant she still had her days. No, well, do not write to the magistrate again, Miss Vance. It is not seemly, a servant writing to the bench. Come to me. Yes, Mr. Crane. He went. His step on the stair was easy again. Julian waited until the sound of it was gone. Then he turned to her, white about the mouth. You lied to him, he whispered. I told him a smaller truth, she said, so he would not see the larger one. There is a difference, Julian. though I grant you it is a fine one." She picked up her pen. "I did write about a former situation. My father's shop in Wexbridge was a former situation. Every word I said was a true word. I only let him arrange them into a story I did not tell." The boy sat with that. He was 11. He was learning that the world had more rooms in it than he had known. "But you have no book, Miss Vance." His voice was very small. "When the magistrate comes, how will you prove it? Crane's book is clean. You said so yourself. He has all the paper, and you have none." She set the pen down. "I am the book," she said. He did not understand her then. He would. There was one more test before the hearing, and Crane set it himself, at dinner, 3 nights on. He had begun watching her more since the letter. Not much, a glance too long over the soup, a way of speaking a figure into the air to see if her face would twitch. She had felt it and given him nothing. That night the talk turned to the rents, as Crane liked it to. He spoke of Low Meadow, of old Harrow the tenant there, and he said, easy as breathing, that Harrow had paid his £8 at Michaelmas like an honest man. £8. She heard it land. Harrow had paid 12. She had it from Harrow's own mouth at market, £12 counted into Crane's palm, and £8 only written in the fine clean book under the tall windows. Now Crane said the lie aloud, at his own table, to see if the simple woman would catch it. She lowered her eyes to her plate. She cut a small piece of mutton. She ate it. Across the table, Mrs. Follet, the housekeeper, nodded along at £8, hearing nothing wrong in it, an honest witness to a false figure. Julian stared very hard at his own hands. Crane watched Eleanor a moment more. Then, satisfied, he reached for the bread. She filed it. £8, spoken false, at his own table, on the 3rd night before the hearing, with Mrs. Follet at the board and Julian beside her. She set it beside all the others, the whole clean, rotten weight of them, 3 years deep. He had just handed her one more, and he did not know his own hand. Oakes came near the turn of the year. He came without warning to Crane, which was Eleanor's doing, for she had asked it in her letter, and the magistrate was a thorough man. He came with 2 constables and his own gravity, and he convened the hearing in the great hall of Thornrise, under the mullioned windows, where the winter light came in thin and clean, and lay in long panes on the flags. They set a table at the head for Oakes. Below it, another for Mr. Pettigrew the clerk, and on it the official ledgers, the fine clean books, 3 years of them. Stacked and squared. Along the wall stood the tenants, summoned as witness, more than a score of them, hat in hand, come in from the frost. Old Harrow of Low Meadow among them, Mrs. Follett by the door, and Silas Crane in his good coat, standing easy, a man who has looked at his own books and found them beautiful. Julian stood at Eleanor's side. She felt his hand find the edge of her sleeve. Oakes opened the matter plainly. A charge had reached the bench, he said, that the accounts of this estate did not agree with the sums truly paid, to the harm of the young heir. He would examine the books, he would hear the tenants, and he would hear the person who had brought the charge. He looked down his list. Miss Eleanor Vance, he read. Governess. Crane's laugh was soft and kind and murderous. He could not help it. Your Honour, he said, I must beg your patience. Miss Vance is a good woman, and gentle with the boy, but I fear she is not, how shall I say it, not equal to a matter of accounts. She keeps no books. She cannot, poor soul. Why, I once gave her a child's slate to practice her letters on. He spread his hands, inviting the room to be gentle. Whatever she has told you, she has muddled. Ask her for a figure and see. A few of the tenants shifted. 1 or 2 looked at their boots. They had laughed at the harvest supper. They remembered. Oakes did not laugh. He was a fair man, and a fair man does not take a steward's word for who may speak. I will ask her for a figure, he said. Miss Vance. Stand, if you please. She stood. She let the vagueness fall off her face like a shawl she had worn only to keep warm. It was the strangest thing in that room, and men spoke of it after, how the governess changed, standing there without moving a muscle. How her eyes came clear, how Silas Crane, watching, stopped smiling and did not himself know why. "Sir," she said. Her voice was quiet and level and carried to the walls. "You have the books before you. Mr. Pettigrew has them. I will speak, and let the clerk follow, and let the tenants say whether I speak true. I will begin 3 years back, at the first quarter after Sir Reginald died, and I will come forward to this Michaelmas last." Pettigrew smirked and dipped his pen, ready to catch her out at the first stumble. "Low Meadow," Eleanor said. "First quarter. Old Harrow tenant, recorded as paid £4, truly paid £6. A difference of £2. She did not pause. Second quarter. Recorded £4. Paid 6. Third quarter, the year the harvest failed at the top field, recorded 4, paid 5, for Harrow was short that once, and Mr. Crane knew it, and wrote him shorter still." Her voice did not rise. Fourth quarter. Recorded 8, paid 12. Pettigrew's pen had stopped. He was turning pages. He was turning them faster. His finger went down the column for Low Meadow, and his face, which had come in ruddy from the cold, began to change. "Mr. Pettigrew," said Oakes, watching him. "Does the book say £4 first quarter for Low Meadow?" Pettigrew wet his lips. "It does, Your Honour." "And the tenant?" Oakes turned. "Harrow, what did you pay that quarter?" Old Harrow stepped forward, turning his hat in his hands. £6, sir," he said. "I counted it into Mr. Crane's own hand." £6, and the same the next, and this last Michaelmas £12, sir, for the Lowfield had come good again. £12. He looked at the book, at Pettigrew's stricken face. "Whatever's written there, sir, I paid 12. The room made a sound, not words, a long, slow, indrawn breath, a score of men understanding the same thing at once. Eleanor did not stop. "Whichcombe," she said. "Ridley, tenant," and she gave the 4 quarters, recorded and paid, penny by penny, and the difference. "Brake Farm." "Ackroyd, tenant," and again. And again. She went along the whole roll of 30 tenants, 3 years deep, 12 quarters. Farm by farm, name by name, date by date, the sum written in Crane's fine clean book, and the sum truly paid into Crane's own palm, and the gap between them spoken to the penny. Pettigrew could not keep up. That was the thing men remembered most. The clerk with the paper could not keep up with the woman who had none. His pen was left behind, then abandoned. He sat turning pages only to check her, and every page he turned she was there before him, and every figure she spoke his own book confirmed, and every discrepancy she named, the tenant against the wall said, "That's so, sir. That's so, I paid the hire." She did not raise her voice once. She did not falter. She did not reach for a paper, because she had none. Because she had never needed one. When she had gone the whole roll, she named the sum. "Across 3 years," she said, "the difference between what was paid and what was written comes to near £600. 9 parts of it paid true by the tenants, 6 parts of it written false in the book. Diverted, sir, before the young master comes of age, from an estate held in trust for a boy of 11 whose father is 3 years dead." Silence. The thin winter light lay on the flags. Julian's hand was tight on her sleeve, and he was not white now, but fierce, staring at Crane with his father's eyes. Crane found his voice. "This is invention." He was not smooth now. There was a crack down the middle of the smoothness. "This is a clever woman's malice, Your Honour. She has heard the tenants gossip at market and stitched a slander from it. She has no book. She has no paper. Where is her proof? A governess stands and chants numbers, and you would take her word over 3 years of kept accounts, kept clean, in my own hand." "In your own hand," Eleanor said. It stopped him. "Yes, Mr. Crane," she said. "In your own hand. That is the whole of it. The tenants paid the higher sum, that is their word, and now the county's. Only one hand wrote the lower. Only one hand could. The clean book is not your defence, sir, it is your confession. No one but the steward keeps that book. No one but the steward set down £8 where 12 was paid. You cannot 3 nights ago, she said at your own dinner table, you said old Harrow paid £8 at Michaelmas. You said it aloud. Mrs. Follett heard you. She turned her clear eyes to the housekeeper by the door. Did he not, Mrs. Follett? At table. £8 for Low Meadow, Michaelmas last. Mrs. Follett, who had spent a season watching Eleanor take a short wage without complaint, who had thought her a poor, slow, gentle thing, Mrs. Follett's mouth opened. He did, sir, she said to Oakes. He said 8. At table. I heard it, and Master Julian heard it. I heard it, Julian said. His voice cracked on it, high and clear and unafraid. He said £8. Harrow paid 12. Miss Vance knew. She always knew. Crane's face had gone from red to a grey no coat could flatter. You said 8 aloud. Eleanor went on, quiet as ever, to see whether I would catch it. To test the simple woman. I did not lower my eyes because I could not count, Mr. Crane. I lowered them because I could. She let that sit. You gave me a slate. You told me, before this child, to practice my letters, because a woman who keeps no ledger cannot count. Do you remember? He said nothing. His hands had begun to shake. I had already written the whole of your dishonesty, she said, and she lifted one hand slowly and touched her fingers to her temple, there at the side of her head, where nothing showed and everything was kept. Here, 3 years of it. Every quarter, every farm, every figure you wrote false. You gave me a slate and asked whether I could read. Her voice never rose, and that was the terrible thing, how level it stayed. You never once asked what I remembered. Oakes turned to the clerk. Mr. Pettigrew, you have followed her the whole roll. Speak plain, on your oath. Is she right? Pettigrew was a small man with a quick pen and no bottom to him, and he saw in one instant which way the room had turned, and which side of it a man kept his neck. She is right, Your Honour, he said, very low. Every figure. I checked them as she spoke. She is right in all of it. He would not look at Crane. The book says what she said it says. God help me, I only ever wrote what he told me to write. He gave me the figures. I never counted the coin myself. I swear it, sir, I never touched the coin. You wrote what you were told and asked nothing, Oakes said dryly. That is a small honesty, Mr. Pettigrew, but I will note you found it at last. He turned back to the room. The tenants, I will have it from your own mouths, each in turn. When I name your farm, stand and say what you paid. And so the chorus rose. Farm by farm down the wall, as Oakes read the roll, each tenant stood and said his true sum, and each true sum was the higher, and each was the one Eleanor had spoken, and not the one the book had kept. Ackroyd of Brake Farm. Ridley of Witchcombe. Man after man, hat in hand, that's so, sir, I paid the higher, she has it right. 30 of them, the same men who had laughed at the harvest supper when Crane raised his glass and called it the arithmetic of a child. They did not laugh now. One by one they stood, and one by one they set the county's own word against Silas Crane, until the whole long wall of them had spoken, and there was nothing left of his clean book but the shape of his own hand around a theft. Oakes let the last man sit. Then he was quiet a moment, ordering it in his mind, a fair and thorough man come to the end of a fair and thorough thing. The accounts are found true, he said at last. Miss Vance's, not Mr. Crane's. He gave his orders in the dry, plain voice of the law. The books impounded, there and then, gathered from Pettigrew's table into the constable's keeping. Silas Crane bound over to answer for the fraud upon the estate, restitution to be made of the sum Miss Vance had named, near £600, recovered to the trust of the heir, an honest agent to be appointed over the accounts of Thornrise until Master Julian Ashworth came of age. And, said Oakes, glancing at his list, one small thing more, since it stood in the charge, the governess's own wage, shorted by half a quarter under colour of an error of the ledger, to be repaid to her before this room, that no honest debt of this house go unpaid a day longer. They counted it into her hand there, in the light from the tall windows, half her quarter's wage that she had thanked him for the loss of, and said nothing, with Mrs. Follet watching. She took it, and she thanked the magistrate, and that was the only coin that changed hands in the whole affair by any word of hers. There was no violence in it, no shout, no blow, only paper and a magistrate and a woman who had held 3 years of numbers in her head until the day the law was ready to hear them. Crane went out between the 2 constables with his good coat and his grey face, past the tenants he had robbed, past the boy he had robbed most of all, and Julian watched him go with his father's eyes and did not look away. On the table, when the room had emptied, lay a child's slate. Julian had fetched it from the schoolroom that morning without telling her, and set it out where all could see the thing Crane had used to shame her. It sat there, blank, grey, wiped clean, holding nothing that anyone could read. Eleanor picked it up. She turned it over in her hands, once, the way she had that first day. Then she carried it home. It was a spring morning when Julian asked her whether she was glad it was over. 6 months had turned. The frost was long gone from the low road to Wexbridge, and the hedges were coming green, and at the schoolroom window the light came in warm and yellow across the table, where the 2 of them sat with a book open between them. A real book, this one, ruled columns, an honest hand. She was teaching him double entry, debit against credit, the sums a man keeps of his own estate, because he had asked to learn it. He had said he wanted to carry in his own head one day a little of what she carried in hers. She had told him no man could learn her memory, but any man could learn to keep his accounts honest, and that the second was worth more than the first. The recovered sum had gone where it was owed. She could see a piece of it from the window. Down across the fields, the tenant cottages wore new thatch, gold bright and thick against the weather, paid for out of the £600 come home. From Low Meadow's chimney the smoke rose straight and steady into the still morning, old Harrow's fire, drawing clean, and the Lowfield green again below it. On the corner of the writing desk sat the slate, wiped clean. She had kept it. Not to remember the shame of it, for she had never felt the shame the way Crane meant her to. She kept it to remember what silence can hold, and for how long, and to what end. Of Silas Crane there was word now and then from the county. He was keeping accounts still, they said, in a place that counted its own iron very carefully, and reckoned its days one by one, and let no man out a morning early. Of Mr. Pettigrew there was word too. He wrote for an honest man these days, over toward the county seat, and by all accounts he checked his figures twice, and then a third time, and slept the better for it. "Are you glad it's over, Miss Vance?" Julian asked again, for she had not answered the first time. He was watching her the way he did when a large thought had caught him. She turned a page of the honest book. Outside, the smoke rose straight from Low Meadow. "I was never afraid of it, Julian," she said. "That is a different thing from glad. A man is glad when a thing turns out he was not sure of." She looked at the slate a moment, grey and clean and quiet on the desk. "I was sure of it long ago. I had done the sum. All that remained was to wait for a room that would hear it." A faint thing touched the corner of her mouth. The waiting was the only hard part. "And that is over, yes, so. Glad enough." He bent back over his columns, the debits on the one side and the credits on the other, learning the honest shape of it. She poured her tea. Her hand was steady as the smoke on the hill. She did not spill a drop. A ledger, after all, can be burned. A book of accounts can be lost, or altered, or written false in a fine clean hand under tall windows, and no one the wiser for years. But a mind that forgets nothing is a ledger no thief can reach, and no fire can take, and no man can call simple twice. They called her simple. Once they will not. Wherever this story is told, make that mistake again. Tell me the name of your own town in a word below, and I'll read it. I forget nothing. The smoke had not shifted. That was the thing she noticed. Looking out across the low meadow fields with the teacup warm between her palms, the smoke from old Harrow's chimney moved neither east nor west, only upward, patient and perpendicular as a column of honest figures carried to the top of the page. There was a rightness to that. The world, she had long believed, arranged its small signs for those who had learned to read them without forcing a meaning. The smoke rose straight. The accounts were straight. The two facts sat beside each other like balanced entries, owing nothing to coincidence. She could smell the new thatch from here when the breeze came up the hill, the green hay sweetness of it, cut grass and binding cord together. The smell of a debt properly discharged. £600 had a smell, it turned out, and it was not the stale ink smell of the ledger where it had been hidden, nor the damp wool smell of Crane's coat on the morning he had stood in that room believing himself untouchable. It was the smell of new thatch drying in thin winter sun, and wood smoke finding its way straight to heaven, and black soil turned over in low meadow where the drainage had been put right at last with money that had always belonged to it. She felt the weight of the slate under her fingertips without looking at it. The chalk was long gone. The surface was smooth now, washed and dried, the faint ghost of the final sum barely readable in certain lights, and she had no need to read it. She had written it once. She had carried it before that in the only place it had ever truly lived, behind her eyes in the dark of the farmhouse kitchen when the fire was out and the house was breathing its slow night breath around her. A slate is only a record for those who cannot hold the number in their head. She had held it from the first day. The tea cooled slightly in the cup. She did not drink it yet. There was a particular quality to these morning hours that she had no wish to push through too quickly. The quality of a settled thing, the rare stillness that comes not from nothing happening, but from everything having happened, and come right, and come to rest. She had known a few such mornings in her years. They did not repeat themselves often enough to waste by moving hastily through them. Julian's pen scratched on. He was doing the November coal entries, debit and credit in their columns, and she could hear in the small deliberateness of his strokes that he was taking care the way she had taught him. Write the figure down, then ask if the figure is true, then write it again only when the answer is yes. It was a slow way to keep accounts. It was the only way that did not eventually require a second room and a locked door and a key no one could account for. She thought about Crane's key. The brass one, heavy, that opened the drawer in the county office where the shadow records had lived, the real sums behind the presented sums, the true debts behind the stated ones. She wondered who held it now, whether some clerk had found it in the transferred effects and puzzled over the drawer it fit, or whether the lock had been changed entirely, a new brass key hanging on a new hook above a drawer containing nothing that needed hiding. It did not matter. The key and the room it belonged to was someone else's concern. Her room had been tidied. Her room held only honest entries now. Low Meadow's chimney sent its thread of smoke up into the pale white sky. She thought about what it means to be believed and how long the waiting is between the knowing and the being believed. The knowing she had possessed from almost the first week, a number that did not arrive where a number was promised, a column that summed differently depending on which version of the ledger you were holding, a pattern of small omissions so regular they ceased to be errors and revealed themselves as method. Method is a different thing from error. Method has intention behind it. She had seen the intention and traced it backward to its source, the way you trace a sum backward from the wrong answer to find where the wrong digit entered, and she had found Crane sitting at the origin of it, as comfortable as a man who has never been found before and does not imagine finding is possible. What he had not understood, what none of them had understood, Pettigrew either, with his double ledger and his anxious pen, was that being simple is protective. When a woman is decided to be simple, she becomes invisible. And invisibility is the best working condition there is for a mind that intends to be thorough. She had been thorough. She had been invisible. She had waited. The tea was drinkable now, cooled to the right degree. She lifted the cup. Outside the light was strengthening across the fields, touching the new thatch gold bright, picking out the green below it where the low ground had recovered. There is a particular satisfaction, not pride. She had been careful to keep it from becoming pride, which is a noisy thing and prone to error, but satisfaction, the quiet kind, the kind that feels like a sum that has checked itself and found itself correct on both sides. She allowed herself that. She sat with it the way she sat with the straight smoke and the smell of new thatch and the sound of Julian's pen moving honestly through its columns, learning the shape of a book that had nothing to hide. A ledger burned will leave ash, and the ash will speak if anyone thinks to ask it the right questions. She had asked the right questions early and kept the answers where no fire could reach them, and no altered entry could contradict them, and no man's confidence in his own unchallengeability could dissolve them. She set the cup down. She straightened the slate with one finger, centering it on the corner of the desk. Simple, they had said. She had not corrected them. Correction, at that point, would have been the mistake.